Hi everyone. Excuse me if I seem a bit flat as I'm talking to you. I've had a really, really tough week with the last 3 days, Wednesday, Thursday, today, Friday, being particularly tough. I was actually going to wait until I felt back in a better space before talking with you, but something's really pushing me to make this now while I'm still in this space. And I think it's because when I followed the push to make this channel, I made the promise to myself that I would keep it real, um, because I don't think it does anyone any favors by pretending that I've got this together all the time and that I've mastered this, because I haven't. And I don't have it together all the time, and I lose my shit just as much as anyone else. And I think as we start shifting out of what I'm understanding to be happening at the moment is I'm feeling the lower vibrations. And I'm sure many of us are, whether you've already felt them and moving out of it, whether you're in it now as well, or whether you'll find yourself moving into it. Hopefully all that will be covered with what I'm going to share with you. But what I found is I'm beating myself up for it. And when we have an opportunity to just let it be what it is, and to express what we're feeling in healthy ways, so whether this be crying, journaling, speaking with someone that you trust, moving your body, there's so many ways we can do it. But what's happening is we don't always find ourselves with the space to do that. And honestly, this week would have been a breeze if I had been able to isolate myself somewhere away from the world and just process what I was feeling. Unfortunately, I have a little one who has a huge heart, and when I'm crying, even when I explain to her that it's okay for people to cry, she gets very upset. She even started, her dad was at work, and she even started calling out for him to come home because Mummy was crying. So instantly I feel this pressure, and maybe it's not a child. Maybe it's you're in the middle of a work meeting when this happens, or you're somewhere where this nervous breakdown is not appropriate for you to be experiencing. So generally we'll suppress it and we'll think, okay, I'll deal with that later. I can't deal with that now. And everything that I've learned teaches that don't suppress. But this is the challenge of navigating this evolving consciousness while still having a foot in I guess what we would call the old world, or the outer reality, is that it's not always a safe place to express what we're feeling. And so we do tend to suppress it. And then the problem with that is then later on, when we do have that space to feel it, we're not feeling it then. So those tears that needed to come out before as a form of release were not allowed to be expressed, or we fought them back once we started the crying process. But then later on, we can't just force ourselves to cry and bring that back to the surface. And so often, and then we don't want to, because we're feeling better. We've moved out of that particular emotion that we were feeling. And so what I've noticed is when this happens frequently, over time, it hits a point where it can't be suppressed anymore. And this is when it feels very much like we are having a nervous breakdown. The tears overflow and they can't be controlled. They just can't be. The more you try to control them, the harder they come. Anger erupts, all of these things. And today it had been building and building and building, and I'm thinking I'm going to just lose my mind if I'm not given the space to just process everything that's going on within me. The sensory overwhelm just got so much. you know, my little one was watching TV, the dog was moving around. These are all just simple things that normally wouldn't bother me, but it was almost just like there was too much coming at me from all directions, and I just felt like I was going to collapse underneath it all. Normal things that I could normally deal with, it, without it disrupting me, were bringing me to my knees. And then the worst part in all of this, and honestly, I'm saying this not because I want sympathy or anything like that. I know you're all feeling it too, or many of you are. I know that I'll shift out of this again, so I'll be fine. But we beat ourselves up, and I erupted this morning because it hit that point where I couldn't contain it anymore. And I ended up snapping at everybody around me, the people that least deserve it. You know, I'd built up stories in my mind why, you know, why I was angry at them and what they weren't doing and what they were doing, and all according to these frequencies that I'm experiencing at the moment. And so then afterwards, then I'm left with feeling all this guilt because I think, oh, I shouldn't have reacted like that. In my heart, I know better, but I wasn't able to get into my heart because I'm so drained, so depleted. I just need that safe space to curl up in a ball. And I did today after my explosion. I was able to calm down enough to apologize and say I need some time to myself. And I went into my bedroom and curled up in a ball under a weighted blanket with a couple of my crystals, bawling my eyes out and just thinking, I don't know about any of this anymore. You know, I speak about all of these things, but is it just my imagination? Is it just something I've convinced myself is true? It felt like I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what this life was that I was living. I'm looking around at everything that's familiar to me, feeling like it's foreign at the same time as it being familiar. I'm aware of all this stuff within me that just I don't know what to do with. And it's a really horrible place to be. And the scary thing is when you feel that you lose that connection to whatever that greater part of you within you is. I used to call it the higher self. Then I started thinking of it as the inner self. The higher self gives this conception that it's outside of us and somewhere way, way, way up there. When I believe that everything's inside of us. So it's the inner self. And then a friend mentioned inner being, which I thought was a much better way of putting it, because it's that higher aspect of you that has transcended the human that's trying to do all the time and is at that place of just higher being. And so I think, yeah, inner being, higher being, whatever name you want to give it. When we lose that connection, that's when the world becomes really scary, because then for me, the light diminishes rapidly. The world becomes this really dark place, and I feel like I don't know how to be in it. And yeah, I think a lot of you can probably relate to that. Along with that usually comes this immense sense of fatigue. Maybe not to sleep necessarily, but I just need to lie down and close my eyes and remove that weight from me, and to just let go to a degree. So anyway, I'm sure you can all understand where I'm coming from. 4 things have helped me immensely during this process, and that's what I wanted to share with you, in the hope that it does the same for some of you on some level. To simplify things immensely, what I'm being shown, and please take what feels right, leave what doesn't feel right, or or doesn't fit with you. It's completely fine. Not saying this is what is, I'm just saying this is how I'm interpreting things at the moment. Reducing things to 3 bandwidths of frequency is simplifying things enormously, but they're the three main ones that we're dealing with at the moment. And most people can largely relate to third dimensional, fourth dimensional, fifth dimensional terms. So these are the three that we seem to be moving up and down between constantly. And the thing is, it's a natural progression to move between all three, but we seem to beat ourselves up when we move into what we would call the 3D frequencies. And when I say this, I mean like fear, doubt, separation, loneliness, sadness, grief, pain, all of those things that don't feel good. Confusion is a big one down there, down on that bandwidth. And the lower ones, I'm not saying that they're bad. They are what they are. Same as the higher ones are higher. It's just a spectrum to be experienced. And this whole thing is about experience. But the thing is, we have come largely to judge the lower frequencies as negative instead of simply being what they are, the lower end of the frequency spectrum. And sorry if I move around a bit, I'm just still feeling a bit uncomfortable in my body. So we feel largely that we're doing something wrong when we're down this lower end of the spectrum, and we feel like we're where we're meant to be when we're on the higher end. If you remember, I think the previous video, I called it Personal Share and Monadic Update on Monadic Integration, and I mentioned the diamond, which was highlighting 4 key points in terms of the its chakras. It's the higher heart, the mouth of God, the third eye, and the crown, and being the pituitary and the pineal glands, and this occipital region. I think it's also known as the Alta Major as well. The diamond that I referenced was showing me the significance of these 4 points. I'm now believing the energy flow between them is like the infinity symbol or the infinity loop. I'm not still 100% sure on what that means, but I'm being given this symbol to talk about in terms of understanding our fluctuation with energy and the frequencies. So the infinity loop in itself shows that the journey is an up and down curving one. So it's in constant motion, and it's constantly rising, constantly falling. And if we think of the bottom level when we're down here as the 3D experiences, and then as we start moving up, we're in sort of the 4D, and then when we get to the top, we're up in what you'd class as the 5D. But then we start shifting down again, and then we're back in the 3D, 4D, 5D. It's a constant cycling. But the thing with the loops is they don't go at any set speed. They'll change speed for each of us and at different times. So sometimes it can feel like we're up here in the higher vibration for quite some time before we drop down, and then we might not drop for long, and then we'll come up. Other times it feels like we're up here for just a second before we're pulled back down again, and then it feels like forever that we're down here struggling to get back up there. And the thing is, it does constantly shift, and so we've got to stop beating ourselves up for it, because, and this is just the bandwidths that are in and the dominant ones now. As the 3D and the 4D fall away, eventually the 5D will be at the bottom of that infinity loop, and higher bandwidths of frequency will be at the top. And it's a process again until we just keep moving up. But the reason that these 3 are so important is because technically we're making not just a shift from one dimension to the next, but because time is so fluid and we can't remain in that 4th dimensional energy, it's a double dimensional shift. You wonder why this is the greatest show in the galaxy right now, because it's never been done as a double dimensional shift before. So huge things go along with that, and we will start moving out of it, but we've got to understand it's a natural process and not to judge it as a negative thing when we're down in the lower vibrations. And I'll get to what we can think about when we find ourselves there in a minute. the other analogy that I'm being shown to go with this one, because we often feel like we're back where we started. Like, hang on, wasn't I dealing with this 6 months ago, a year ago, whatever it might be? I don't know if you remember those slinkies, we called them over here. They're like a spring that we had as kids that would, walk down steps and, stuff like that. I think the spring is supposed to represent the spiral of creation, but because I'm being shown it as a slinky, we're going to go with that. If you held a slinky in front of you, you would see each individual coil, but it's very hard to tell where one level of coil ends and the next one starts, because it's just such a gradual climb up this coil by coil by coil. And if you were to stand on one of those coils and move your way around, it would be very easy to believe that you are getting nowhere, because you keep coming back to the same place, pretty much. The view's the same when you get back to this spot and that spot and that spot. But it would only be when you had the awareness to look down instead of out or up and see that you have actually shifted, but you just haven't been aware of it because it's been so subtle most of the time. The other thing that's happening is that each level of the coil, I'm being shown the 4 seasons of the year, and the fact that we generally have very similar experiences each season. For myself, I could tell just after equinox by the chill in the air that I felt that one morning that hadn't been there before, and just the way the sky looked outside, that we're definitely on the way to winter. And I felt something shift within me. I can't put my finger on what it was. Not a sense of depression or sadness. It was just maybe a sense of this cold washing over me, and I instinctively felt that I wanted to start bunkering down, if you know what I mean. So many people push themselves to do what's against what their natural inclination is, especially during winter. That's when we want to eat warm food, wrap up with blankets and heaters and just snuggle in and kind of hibernate in our homes. But many people will push themselves to go to the gym, eat salads, do everything they don't want to do because they think that's what they should do. That I think we could learn a lot if we kind of just went with the cyclical nature of our body and the seasons, which kind of tie into each other. So when we find ourselves in these winter periods, we tend to judge them harshly instead of just seeing them for what they are, a phase that is part of the natural cycle that we go through. So I hope those 2 analogies help to understand that it's okay to have these fluctuations, to feel that we're back where we started, because we're not back where we started. We've evolved. The theme is the same. The experiences will be different. It's just the way that kind of circling works. The other thing that I feel guided to share that's really helped, and it's really ironic, I was having this as a conversation with a friend on here via email about a week ago, and just talking about engaging with the lower vibrational world and how it can be very draining and exhausting all the time, and at the same time feeling like if we just removed ourselves and isolated somewhere, then how are we actually bringing our light to the areas of the world that need it? And I think that's a really fine line to navigate, so I won't get too caught up in that. But I shared with this person channeled information, and it was information the Arcturians brought through Suzanne Lai. And at the time, I could not have realized how relevant this would all be. And this was only about a week ago. But what I was sharing as concepts at that time, my understanding has grounded now so much, which is why I want to share it with you. So there are generally 3 reasons why we will find ourselves falling out of our naturally higher resonance and into the lower frequencies, and therefore a lower resonance ourselves. The first one being that we haven't made regular time to connect with our inner being, because when that connection is present on a regular basis, it's very hard to fall out of that, or at least for long periods of time, or to the degree that I have been. The second reason is, and this is generally when we find ourselves, I mean, we dance, as I said, we do this dance between the frequencies, but there are times when we find ourselves feeling so low, and even though we have a million tools at our disposal potentially that we know could bring us out of it, it's like we just don't have the energy or the capacity to do any of these things. And this is when these moments that I'm talking about. So when we find ourselves unable to shift out of that, it's been because either we've gone too long without making the time and space to have that connection with our inner being, and therefore draw strength and light from that. Or, and this is very relevant right now, we are required to be in those vibrations because these are what we are in the process of purging, and you can't throw out something that you don't have. If that makes sense. It's like clearing out your house and trying to throw things away that you just don't have. So we can only purge what we have at that within us at that time. So often we will need to be in that vibration so that we can purge it and release it. And it's also when we're being given an opportunity to let go of old programming, old beliefs, old ways of being and operating in the world, and embrace, I guess, the new operating system that we know we're going to be using going forward. The third reason is, and this is one that I forget much of the time, is that we're being called into service. Our light, our higher vibration is needed in an area or a situation, or for a person that's experiencing these lower frequencies, in order to help transmute that and shift that for whatever the situation may be. That gave me great comfort as well. And then also, once we find ourselves back in that higher resonance, it's an opportunity to then, one, look at ways we can make sure we're making that connection strong and present on a regular basis, and that we don't go that long again before making that space to have that inner connection. 2, we can learn to recognize when these signs that a big purge or transmutation is occurring, and that we can navigate it with greater ease. Most of us know what we need. It's just that we've largely created circumstances in our life that make it difficult to get it. You know, I know that I need a lot of time alone, so I should have really thought about that when I had another child. If you know what I mean. We don't want to uncreate the things that we've created, but we've often created circumstances that make navigating this part of the journey particularly challenging. So yeah, and the third thing that we can do is to, if it's that we're being called into service, is to understand that that's what we're doing. We are bringing our light into places that still hold quite dense darkness, so that an opportunity for that transformation can occur. And the best thing we can do in that time is to connect with our inner being and then like wrap it around us, like this almost, the way it was described in the material was as a spacesuit of protection, of this higher vibration, so that we can safely share what we've signed up to share where it's needed, but without it having this immensely draining effect on us. So yeah, I found that incredibly useful. And the other thing that's been really, really helpful is when I do get moments where I can close my eyes and just breathe, a really simple breathing technique that I'll start with it, the first part, and then how we can adapt it to help others beyond ourselves. So initially, if you're feeling all of this, any or all of the emotions that I've touched on, so sadness, loneliness, separation, confusion, lack of faith, lack of worth, anger, frustration, resentment, all of those feelings that do not feel good, think of it as this dark cloud that's surrounding you. And when that dark cloud's around you, it makes it very hard to hear the communication from your inner being that it's trying to share with you. And then that's when we feel very alone in this whole process, not just alone on a physical level, but we feel like we've been cut off from our guides and that connection that helped us navigate it. So when you get a moment, close your eyes and picture yourself wherever you are, whatever you're doing in that moment. I will do a timestamp on here, so if you want to skip all the talk and just jump straight to this technique at any point in time, you can. And again, sorry, I still feel in that just half here, half somewhere else space. So picture yourself wherever you are, whatever you're doing, and see yourself surrounded by this dark cloud. This is what's preventing you from feeling that connection and what's making you feel so confused. And so this is where you kind of step into the role of the witness or the observer. You're just observing everything. You're trying to change nothing. You're not interacting with it in any way. You're simply seeing what's happening. And so when you take a deep inhale, actually before I do that, I'll just explain the next bit. So basically what you're going to do is inhale that cloud so that the you that's sitting there surrounded by it can start to feel a bit clearer. Sometimes I don't know what to do with, when I say this darkness, it's more a heaviness. I don't want to be releasing all this negativity out into the world. So what I often like to do is just surround myself with this huge ball of violet fire, which will transmute anything that's of a lower nature being emitted. But for this exercise, what we're going to do is breathe it up to, and this is where you can give it whatever name you want. I like the all that is, because to me that represents everything. The all that is, the all that is seen, the all that is unseen, the all that is known, the all that is unknown, the all that is being experienced, the all that is yet to be experienced, the all that is manifest, the all that is potential. So it's just, I guess, the ultimate creator, God, whatever name feels right to you, that's who you're going to give this to. Why? Because it was the all that is that wanted to have the experience of itself, but without knowing itself. And the only way for it to experience all of these feelings, frequencies, emotions, everything that occurs in these lower realms is through us. So we're not, I used to feel I was doing something wrong by going, here's all my negativity. But what we're actually doing is saying, here, you wanted to experience everything. I'm handing you my experience. I'm giving it all to you. The good, the bad, the ugly, the beautiful. It's all yours. So see yourself where you are. You'll take a deep breath in, and you're going to draw in with that inhale all that dark cloud, or as much of it as you can. And then on the exhale, you're going to exhale it to all that is to experience, because this is the only way it can share that experience. And then on your next inhale, you're going to draw in all this pure light, this life force from the all that is. And you're going to exhale it into you, the you that's feeling all this confusion, because it's very hard to really draw in that true life force energy when we're feeling so weighted down and so surrounded by this dark cloud. So you're going to, or essentially you're going to be breathing for the you that feels they can't breathe. So again, you take another breath in, you draw in this dark cloud that's there, and you exhale it to the all that is. And then you draw in on the next inhale all this pure light and life force. And on your exhale, you breathe it out into you. And then you keep doing this until you feel some of that dark cloud around you lifting, and you feel yourself back in this calmer space. You may not be able to do it until you're completely there. You might only be able to duck off for a minute or two. If you're at work, you might have to excuse yourself to go to the bathroom and just sit there and breathe for a couple of minutes, but it might be just enough to help bring you back to that space where it's not so overwhelming. So yeah, I hope you find that useful. Actually, I probably won't bother time stamping that, because it really only went for a short amount of time. And it's pretty simple to remember. I think you can probably just rewind it. So yeah, I really did want to wait till I was feeling much better and much more myself. But I feel like if we wait till then even when we talk about it, it's kind of from this, yeah, everything's okay place. And it I don't know. I hope you know what I'm getting at. I'm going to go, because I feel like I'm going to start drifting off and not making any sense. I hope some of those things help you understand that it's perfectly okay to feel everything that you're feeling. When we find ourselves experiencing these lower vibrational emotions and everything else, you're not doing anything wrong. You're not failing in any way. It's not that you should have got this mastered by now, so all of this stuff means that you're doing it wrong. It's in many ways that we're doing it right. We're moving around this cycle, we're moving around this loop, and we're experiencing all the parts of it. But the lower parts that we're experiencing now will soon be, I wouldn't say long forgotten, maybe long forgotten, because ultimately we're shifting up bit by bit. So that means eventually what we're feeling at our lowest is nowhere near as low as what it used to be. I mean, there's always going to be low points, but even though I've struggled immensely this week, if I'm really honest with myself and look back over past struggles, it hasn't been as bad compared to where I was the week, prior to moving into this state of struggle. It's shit. Absolutely shit. No other way to say it. It's really brutal at times. Like, my eyes are hanging out of my head now. I'm so tired. But compared to where I've been before, it's getting easier sometimes. But I would definitely say I'm experiencing things differently than the way that I used to before doing this whole path more consciously. So anyway, talked for way longer than I anticipated. I'm sorry about that. I hope it helps. And just remember, if you are struggling at the moment, you will move out of it. It's the natural progression. It just depends on how quickly things move. And if you're not feeling it yet, it doesn't necessarily mean you will right now. But if you look at the cycle of your life, you'll probably identify some patterns there. So just trust that if you do find yourself in it, you weren't in it before, you're in it now, but you will move out of it. And that it's okay to feel like your world's ending, because in many ways it is. And another thing that I was talking to somebody else about is, you've heard the analogy before, I'm sure, that we're kind of in the labor process of birthing this new consciousness. The labor sucks. It really does. You don't have a baby yet. You don't know what it's going to look like or what it's going to be like. You know that it's coming because you're in a world of pain and everything around you doesn't feel real anymore. You sort of are in this state of somewhere else, having this experience. And that's where we're at. It hurts like hell. It's confusing as hell. Sometimes we can feel like we're losing our minds and in that stage of delirium. But it will all be worth it in the end. We're going to birth something truly wonderful. And all of this will be something that we look back on and we talk about, but it's not how we experience it right now. So anyway, I'm going. I love you all. I hope you're doing okay. I hope that in some way this has helped at least somebody out there. And if not, you've all helped me by giving me a space to just talk. So anyway, biggest heart hugs to you all, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.